Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Hopelessly Gifted podcast. I'm your host, Mark Talaga. Today, we're going to talk about something that is relatable to all parents on some level, especially if you're listening to this podcast and raising gifted, asynchronous, neurodivergent kids. This is a good one to pay attention to. We have a very special guest that is going to talk about how to raise resilient kids in the sense of effective strategies for parenting strong-willed children. Now, I said off mic that strong-willed might be a nice way to put it, and there's other words that I'm sure parents tend to use, but you get the idea of what a strong-willed child is, but we'll dive in as well. So before we begin, let me introduce our guest. Dr. Pam McCaskill is the owner and director of McCaskill Family Services, a private clinical psychology practice with locations in Brighton and Plymouth, Michigan. She has over 30 years of experience as a clinical psychologist working with children, teens, and adults. She's an expert parenting coach and specializes in strong-willed children, ADHD, learning disabilities, anxiety, and depression. Welcome, Dr. Pam. How are you?
Hi, thank you so much for having me here, Mark. I'm excited to chat with you today and
Oh, yeah.
get into one of my favorite topics, which is the strong-willed child, the one that kind of pushes back on people.
Well, let's start with that. Why do you feel like you're so drawn to this type of kid?
Uh, it actually started when I was a teenager. I had a family member who was kind of misunderstood, strong-willed, struggling in school, just not kind of fitting the mold of, everybody else around them.
Yeah.
And, at that time, they didn't know a lot about the stuff that we know now, and went in to get an evaluation with a psychologist at the time, saved up, every penny that we could to make this happen at a time when money was really tight.
Right.
And, again, back then they just didn't know. So the psychologist at the time said, you got to toughen this kid up and, get a hammer to him and, just really dig in deeper and get them to do it your way.
Wow.
And so that was the approach. And I saw it kind of from a helpless perspective, as a teen. And I thought there's just something not right about this. But I didn't know what. And, I was young. So when I went to college, this person continued to struggle, and I thought there's got to be another way. And so I was drawn to the field of psychology and was told by high achieving people that I needed to go into medicine. So I applied to med school, got in. Great career, but it was just not where I really felt I needed to be to effectuate some change in the misunderstood children. So I went to graduate school in clinical psychology and began my journey of really trying to understand what was going on behind the scenes, and developed a bit of practice in neuropsychological evaluations where I thought, okay, testing might help me to understand it, and which it did, but there was just so much more. So I spent my career building the foundation of helping, what I call kind of the misunderstood children, the strong-willed, more, again, like defiant,
Right.
kind of kids. So
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
that's what I do.
Yeah. Well, not only is it a deeply personal issue, but it's something where it came out of this feeling of helplessness that I know many parents out there feel that all the time. They feel the helplessness of, I don't know what to do here. I'm not, yeah, do I go this hard-nosed approach and bring the hammer down? Do I just try to make things easy and stress-free for them? And maybe that will bring them on board. What do I do? And, I love your story of heading down a path of trying to help, realizing what's not a good fit, and maybe gearing it more towards what you really care about and what has a purpose for you. And so, as you've gone down this path and learned as much as you have about these strong-willed kids, what do you feel like where did that light bulb moment come from? Was it in the neuropsych evaluation? Was it this place of, I'm starting to slowly but surely realize more and more about what makes these kids tick? When did things start to switch over for you? Were you really like, okay, I see what's going on here?
Um, so I've always felt a strong connection to children. I was babysitting since I was 10,
Mm-hmm.
running a family of 5 young kids when I was 12 down the neighborhood. And so I really spent a lot of time listening and paying attention to children. And there was always, those one or two that were getting yelled at or kicked out of the classroom or, kicked out of the house, go play outside, that kind of stuff. And I just started paying attention to like, who are you and what makes you tick? And this anger and defiance and what you're putting out in the world can't be it. And so kind of taking a step back and then obviously with some training through school is really just listening to them. And I was at a conference once in my 20s with Dr. Ross Green, actually,
Mm,
and he said, if a child can do well, they will do well. And if a child is not doing well, then it's really our job to figure out why.
right.
And that has been sort of the cornerstone of what I find passion in. And it really starts with connecting with the child in front of you, not the child that you wish they were,
Right.
but actually who they are.
You're
And
bringing up an interesting point about the idea of they didn't feel like listened to. And I think that's kind of a key element where, why do you feel like it's so hard for these kids to get heard in what they're really trying to say? It's because it's this idea that they're not. Hold on, I'm going to take that again. What do you feel like is the disconnect for these kids where they're not being heard?
um, so with strong-willed children in general, what I have found is that when you ask them a lot of questions or you give them a lot of commands, do this or why this or coming at them, they experience somewhat of a stress reaction. And it's more so than perhaps the stress of other children or other people who don't have this reaction to commands or questions. So even you and I mean, you're asking me questions now, and I feel a little bit of stress, right? Like I'm like, oh gosh, I hope I, get this right, or I'm
Sure.
kind of on stage a little bit, but it's at a level that is within an area of that, like I feel like I have control of it. With strong-willed kids, or they experience a higher level of stress when you're kind of coming at them.
Mm-hmm.
And so they engage in what many people know as like that fight, flight, or freeze. And that fight can come out as anger or defiance when it's really in my experience, stress or anxiety.
Right.
And so they're kind of pushing you back, right? And then sometimes they just freeze or refuse to talk or shut down. Sometimes they run out of the room and just,
Oh, yeah.
might throw an F-bomb along the way, and you're like, okay, how can I connect to this kid, that's like telling me as an adult to,
Yeah.
take it somewhere. So
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to come back to that when they are in that fight mode because you've just gotten attacked. And so what do we do as parents? I'm a parent, and we fight back, right? Like, wait, you can't talk to me that way. Like,
Right.
this is unacceptable. And then, we have our parents' voices in our heads, right? Like, how can you let your child talk to you that way? And you're like, I'm not, like, I promise,
Yeah.
I'm not
Right.
letting this happen. And so then we might in turn come back a little harder, right? Like, this is my space, this is my home, this is my office. And so what does that do, right? It just further puts your control over them, which further increases their anxiety,
Right.
which further causes them to fight or freeze. And the pattern just kind of continues until there's usually a pretty big explosion. And words are said, or, there's parents crying as they go to sleep at night, like, oh my gosh, I never thought I would ever say this to my child,
Right.
but like, I just did call them all these names, and
Right.
this is not who I am. And, how do I make this better? And um,
And as a parent, part of me wants to know, okay, they're having a stress and anxiety reaction to when you're coming at them. And I assume that could mean anything. I'm coming at them with, hey, you need to do the laundry. I'm coming at you with, hey, you did this thing to your sister. But help me understand then, what are they really stressed about? Or where's the anxiety really stemming from? Because in our line of work we say that anxiety is a symptom where there's a skill that you haven't developed or mastered yet, that you don't have access to accomplish something in the moment, and that's where your
mhm.
anxiety is going up. So what is it that they're struggling to do in those moments?
It really is down to something very basic. They are struggling to answer you.
Mm,
So you might say, "How was your day today after school?" And their bandwidth might be so low to even engage in coming up with an answer to a question. So it seems like answering a question, kind of like we're doing right now, is an easy process, but it actually isn't. There's a lot that goes in to formulating the thought, formulating the words, attending to the other person's needs for what they might be looking for or wanting to hear, shutting out all of the distractions that are going on when a question is asked internally, like their thoughts, as well as externally, stuff going on in the car or in the room. And so there's oftentimes so much going on, and if there's a glitch in one of those systems
hmm
that is responsible for formulating an answer to a question, that could be a challenging task for a child. And you don't know how many questions they were asked in the 6 hours prior to you asking that one. So they may have put all of their energy into school or social interactions, or, other things throughout the day. And you asking that one question, I often use the term bandwidth, like they have nothing left for you. And I think parents get the most of it, because if you are unconditionally loving your child and really truly there, they know that you're not going to leave them. You're not going to reject them or abandon them, or, kick them out of school or kick them out of a friendship group. And so there's some security in that.
right.
And I really just can't tap back into any more resources right now for you.
Right. Right. For the where I feel safest is the reason I'm going to kind of let it all hang out of where I'm really at. And so it's more of a recognition that when you have a strong-willed child on a consistent basis around everything, everything's a fight, everything's a challenge. Um, it is going to be seen mostly with the parents.
Yes, very often. And so they can be wonderfully behaved at school, or, at the neighbor's house or other people's homes. And then, parents will come in and talk to me, or talk to us, and they're like, you know what, a different child at home. And I really, I don't know who to talk to. I don't want to like badmouth my kid, but like, I don't like this kid. I love him or
Right.
her, but like, I don't like my child.
Right.
And that's a really tough place to be in. And it's very, very, very common. And so there's a lot of people that are suffering in silence,
Right.
at home. And I really just encourage people to reach out, listening to podcasts like yours, or accessing information, so that you're not doing this alone. It's a very, very tough road.
100%. And my wife is famous for saying, my kids or our kids love to make us look like liars. Where we're like, oh, they're having a meltdown right now. They're like, I've never seen your kid have a meltdown ever. I'm like, yeah, they save it for home. They make us look like liars.
Right.
But yes, there's this idea that we can't share our experience or stories when other people aren't seeing it because the kid
Hmm.
is trying to keep it together, you know.
Hmm.
And so, I'm hearing how there's this bandwidth issue of the kid is spending this bandwidth or maybe just comes into this world having lower bandwidth than most. And so, parents' usual next question is, well, how do we help them increase that bandwidth? Because I can recognize what's happening and I can even understand it or empathize with it. But how do I help my kid? What do we do about that? I'm sure that's a very complicated question, but what comes to mind?
No, yeah, it's a common question, and I'm glad you asked that. I think the first step is we have to understand. So you think of it like an iceberg. So you're seeing the behaviors at the top of the iceberg, right? Like they don't have the bandwidth, or they're shutting down, or they're refusing to do what they're told to do, or they don't help out around the house, or they're fighting with their siblings, or whatever else. The list is like endless.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all the top of the iceberg stuff. And that's important. And that's what everybody comes in talking to me about. And I want to hear all of that. And I believe parents when they say it. I don't have to see it to
Right.
believe it. They are living it. But I'm very curious as a first step is what's underneath the iceberg, right? Because I can give you like some quick tips, and everybody wants the magic wand, myself included. I don't have one, but sometimes
Right.
what I say works, right? And they're like, "Oh, this is working so great!" Like, but that's just the tip of the iceberg, and it's going to come back. So we want to understand not only where the child's weaknesses are or struggles, but really where their strengths are. Because
Right.
looking under the iceberg, we can see what they're really strong in that we might not be tapping into in order to create a plan that can help them, reach their highest potential behaviorally, emotionally, educationally, become, happy, independent adults that are contributing to society. Like
Right.
that would be great. And there's a way to do it. We don't just say, well, okay, my child is fighting back on the world. I'll just like let them go and hope they become a CEO someday. Right.
Right.
Like that could happen.
Right.
And there's strong-willed people in the highest levels of every career. You will find a strong-willed adult. So I love it. Like, but let's channel it so they end up doing what they love in life, not in jail.
Right. Right.
Because there's two pathways here, and so I don't know if I diverted from your question, but I think step one is finding out like the why. What is where's the glitch,
Well,
right?
and like you said, it's like if they're coming from school where they've been asked, 100 questions in a row, or they had a particularly challenging day, there's something going on in that process where they're keeping it together, but they're spending more energy
Mhm.
than maybe they should be or could be.
Mhm.
And so I want to weave in what the McCaskill Family Services does really well with, neuropsych evaluations. When you take a kid through a neuropsych eval, and we're going to speak with a broad brush here, but what do you typically end up finding are these challenges and vulnerabilities that make that so much harder for them to where their bandwidth is low by the time they get home?
Um, so, through the evaluation process, you're basically doing like, think of like pencil and paper tasks. There's nothing like invasive, but we're taking a look at every single like area of the brain, and it's a very complicated organ.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of processes that go into learning or behaving or controlling your emotions or speaking or language. And so we will test things like their memory, or we'll test things like their attention span or executive functions. Executive functions is a word that just means like, how are they keeping it all together and managing all of the moving parts?
Right.
And seeing if there's perhaps a strength or a glitch there. Perhaps there's a glitch in the language system or how they're perceiving or experiencing people talking to them. And maybe that's hard. And so they're putting a lot of energy into the language piece of it. Or maybe there's a glitch in how they're expressing themselves and the words that they choose. And maybe they're getting picked on at school because the words that are coming out aren't, mainstream or fitting in. And so they're starting to get teased.
Hmm.
um, maybe there's some sleep problems, maybe there's nutritional problems, maybe there's other things going on, but we look at the whole child.
Right.
Maybe it is a parenting issue. It's often not that parents um, are doing the wrong thing. I rarely find that. It's just maybe we need to tweak it, like when you're like driving a car and you know how to drive a car, but we put you into a Mack truck. Like, we just got to like tweak this a little bit. You got to
Right.
do the turns a little wider, and you've got the base there, but let's just, kind of
Adjust.
ramp it up a little. Right.
Yeah. And so I guess maybe I'm hearing this theme, and this is probably too black and white, but the idea that if you're dealing with a persistently, chronically strong willed child where these power battles are happening constantly, it's almost a guarantee then that there's glitches and something missing and something more complicated. It's not just the psychology of the kid or that they're a non empathetic, you know, kid, right? And so it's kind of like what I'm hearing. Like if I have a very strong-willed child, I need to evaluate further. Would that be fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. I've been at this for like just coming on 30 years. I have literally never met maybe one in a hospital setting,
Hmm.
one out of the thousands and thousands of children that I've worked with that does not want to do well and please their parents and be successful.
Right.
Like that's in their heart. Like they want to fit in. Um, and so if they're not, there's a glitch somewhere. And we don't, as a clinical psychologist, we make diagnoses, ADHD, dyslexia,
Right.
anxiety, depression, all this stuff. Like we'll put those in our reports because that's how we get help for kids.
Right.
But like, I don't care so much about the diagnostic label as I am passionate about like, let's dig in and find not only where the glitches are, but where are the strengths?
Hmm.
Because what you're just seeing is the glitch on parade, and it's covering up all of the like wonderful gifts that they have because their negative behavior or their lack of managing their emotions is covering up like it's like some true diamonds in there. Like it's amazing when that's uncovered.
Right. And I think as these kids go through this process, if they've, been kind of dealt with the same way year over year over year, and it's always pointing out, here's the deficits, here's what you're not doing well, here's what your problem is.
Mhm.
They're absolutely trained to look for what they don't do well rather than
Mhm.
seeing a strong willed child as, oh, this kid's got potential. And this
Right.
kid has a lot to offer. And, because I would imagine that the reason not every single kid is a strong-willed child is because you have this, on one side, this awareness of themselves on some deep level that they have a lot to do and say, and they have a way they want the world to be and how they want to manipulate things in their environment. But there are those glitches that get in the way.
Mhm.
And it's so
Mhm.
frustrating. And so, like they're knocking their head against the wall. But yeah, you don't want to lose the fact that it's the potential of them to make big things happen for themselves in whatever way that looks for the kid. But you have to have both, is what I'm hearing from you, that you have to have the awareness of that there's strength in all of that, but we have to suss out where these glitches are so that they're more supported.
Right, exactly. And that's been the foundation and the entire mission of our practice is figuring out where the glitches and don't forget the strengths because that's also really really important, but also okay, now we have this roadmap. Essentially, what do we do about it?
Mm.
And the second half of our practice is the interventions or the help or what people call therapy, but it's the type of therapy where parents are heavily involved in the process, and we are essentially teaching parents how to be child psychologists at home, because then they are experiencing the growth and change, because we're not just going to go, okay, he told me to F off today, so I just like ignore that forever. Like, no, we don't ignore it forever, but we do have to very slowly and systematically make a change in that behavior, because that behavior is telling us something, about what's going on inside the child, and first understanding it, and then secondly the plan for what to do about it. And
Right.
it's very rewarding. It's been a great career. I'm not done yet, but it's
Yeah.
it's been a great career.
I was gonna
So
say you got more in there,
oh,
but
I sure do.
yeah, 100%. Well, and as you're talking, I'm getting this sense of, look, it's a process. We don't skip steps. We don't look for shortcuts. We don't have the magic wand to get the symptomatic behavior to totally erase in the moment. Though there's lots of things we can do to make it easier. But then you have the challenge of, like you said before, like you have the voice of your own parents in their head, or, you have teachers who are frustrated and struggling, and you have all these other systems now in
Mm-hmm.
play that are also interacting with the kid in a way where it's not just, understanding it for yourself, but how do you get everybody else to understand it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How do we get everybody on the same
Yeah.
page?
Yeah. And I think, step one is, the parents, and helping them to understand that it's not their fault, and it's not their parenting, and it's not something that they have messed up. It's really just a tweaking of that, and through some understanding and some education there, if once parents fully understand what's happening, then they can start to educate other people that are involved in the care of their child, so teachers and you know um, extended family members, and they can start to become spokespeople for their child.
Mm,
Like, yep, we're having a bit of a meltdown right now. She just needs a minute. Like, do you have a quiet room in your house where she can go without judgment? This is, if you brought a child with a wheelchair into school or into a family member's home, there would be a million accommodations.
right.
Everybody would be walking around going, okay, wait, let me move this chair, or let's make sure we have ramps, or do you need anything, sweetheart? Like, I'll give you, do you want something to eat or drink? Let me get that for you. um, there's a hidden wheelchair with some of these children.
Mm,
And once we understand it, we can start to educate people on what that looks like. And we help parents, and we go into schools and talk to teachers. We do a lot of teacher and services on this. And, we have grandparents coming in very frequently, like, help me understand why
right.
my daughter, who's now a mother, is ignoring all these swear words in her house. Well, let me help you to understand why, right? Because
Hmm.
there is a why. And we're working on that, but there's sometimes bigger fish to fry than maybe a swear word coming out of their mouth.
Right, for sure. And I like the idea of how you make things equitable when you really understand what's really going on, because, schools struggle with the idea of, oh, it's invisible, so I don't really know it, or they just don't have the training,
Hmm.
as like a psychologist would, or somebody in special education. And only when they see that there's something else going on can they start to create the equity so that they get what they need in order to,
Hmm.
be the kid they need to be. Um,
Hmm.
the thing that keeps coming to my head is, I feel like as we're all imagining these strong-willed children, we're imagining them younger. We're imagining them little. And strong-willed children grow up, and
Hmm.
there's still strong-willed
Hmm.
children living at
Hmm.
home, maybe into their 30s.
Hmm. Hmm.
What would you say to a parent of, well, it feels like I missed my chance. They're in their 20s now, but it's still, I'm dealing with this strong-willed individual. And do things change? Is it the same message?
Hmm.
What do you think?
Yeah, so we work with people over the course of the lifespan.
Mm,
So we have a whole division of working with teenagers and young adults. We kind of call our young adults the failure to thrive group,
Hmm.
because they're still in it and they're just on the cusp of it, but they're still living at home, at 25, 26, 30 maybe. And it is never, ever, ever, ever too late to start to build a relationship, a positive relationship with any individual in your life.
Yeah.
And children at all ages want the love and acceptance and admiration of their parents.
Hmm.
So even if your adult child, is distant or not talking to you or showing signs that they're just not quite interested in that, we have a program for parents of adults, that starts again with where that adult child is and helps you to make some inroads into building, off of the foundation of that relationship. And we've had great, great success. But again, if you have a strong-willed adult child, you can't approach them with, "This is what I want, and this is how we're going to do it," right?
Right.
Like that goes back to that fight or flight. Like, no, you're not going to tell me how to talk to you, right?
Hmm.
But there is a way to do it, and it's never, ever, ever, ever too late. We had a woman who was 78 years old, just last week, call and say, "I'm getting a little closer towards the last chapter of my life, and I have had an estranged relationship with my son for 25 years."
Wow.
And we're like, "All right, let's see what we can do."
Right.
And they're coming in together. It's so rewarding. So
Oh,
there's no age that's too late.
first of all, I love that story, and good on that woman for calling. I love that. Um,
I know.
you know what I mean? Like, good for you. That's hard to do at 78. Wow, that's cool.
Right?
Yeah,
I
right.
know.
Let me throw this little curveball, because I sometimes when I'm interviewing, I'm always thinking of who's that parent out there that's still listening and saying, like, this is all good, this is all great, but I'll tell you, my situation's way harder, way more complicated. And I think the one that comes to mind for me is, okay, you have an older child or young adult, and you have a sense that they're struggling and they have these glitches and issues, but they're refusing. They're saying, no, it's not me. I'm not the problem.
Mhm,
I've never had the
mhm,
problem. You're the problem.
mhm, mhm,
And you're trying to be there to understand and support that kid, but the kid is not saying it, well, it has nothing to do with me. What would you guide parents to do maybe in that situation?
mhm. Well, there's always help. So, and I'll give some suggestions practically, if you are not accessing help, but you can come in and see a therapist who, can work just with you, even if
Hmm.
your adult child or even if your teenager what refuses to come in. There's things you can do to, help make some changes in that situation that don't involve your child actually coming to a therapist. Um, but the one suggestion is, I kind of fall back on like natural consequences or just life consequences that are
Hmm.
beyond parental control. So when you do this, this is just naturally going to happen. Like when you do not leave the house and go to work, you are going to lose your job. And when you lose your job, you do not have money.
Hmm.
And when you do not have money, you cannot move towards independence. And so you are telling me that you don't need me, you don't want me, you don't want me to be involved in your life, but I'm gonna like visually write this out for you and show you the path that you are headed down, which is keeping me in your life. So perhaps you are keeping me in your life because without a job or some financial security, you need me.
Hmm.
And even just drawing, like we'll do this in a therapy session, even just drawing this path out with parents and leaving it on their bed, right? Like they don't have to talk to you.
Right.
They're not going to not look at it. If there's a piece of paper sitting on their bed, they're going to look at it.
Right.
They're curious. They
Right.
might tear it up or throw it away,
Yeah.
But once it's said or once it's texted, text is another good way to communicate.
Yeah.
Once it's out there, it's like in their brain.
Right.
And you're doing this through empathy and love. Like, I
Hmm.
care about you and I'm hearing that you don't want me in your life, but I feel confused
Hmm.
because the actions that you are taking are pulling me closer to you.
I love it. I think that's great.
So,
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you're dealing with the processing issue as well. As if you have a strong-willed kid, on some level, their bandwidth or their ability to process information, especially information that they feel is intolerable or emotionally charged, it's lower. And so you're finding
mhm,
ways to slowly but surely have them process the information. And it's probably not going to be in one, come to Jesus moment conversation. It may
right.
be this slow and steady, consistent,
Mhm,
empathetic, revisiting of, hey, this confusion I still have still exists because here's what I'm
mhm,
seeing, and so on and so forth. So I love the message. And I think what a lot of parents out there may struggle to do is to be like that 78-year-old woman and say, you know what? I can't convince my kid to come in, but maybe I need help. Maybe I need to
mhm,
be the one
mhm,
to say, help me walk through this.
mhm.
Because I don't want parents stuck in the idea of like, well, if my kid doesn't get better, then I can't be better. Incorrect.
Right. Right.
You don't have
Absolutely.
control over that. Not in that way.
Correct.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, I
Yeah.
love that. Very cool.
Yeah.
So, we've touched on this, but we haven't talked about it as clearly as I'd like for you. You have created a teaching module, a webinar system to help parents work and have strategies for dealing with strong-willed children. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, I have been teaching parenting workshops in person for much of my career. And with the pandemic, everything came out of person and we became very connected through our computers. And so I put all of like kind of the best of the best strategies, like very practical strategies, into a workshop that has essentially 10 modules in it. And it's really meant for children ages about 2 to 12. So this
Okay.
is the younger group. We have a lot of information on teens and young adults, but we don't have necessarily a workshop format for that. So that would be more individually connecting with our practice for help with those age groups. But this is a cost effective way to get strategies that I have found to be the most often successful. So there's a lot on the internet. You look at a bunch of different stuff and you're like, I don't know where to start. This takes you in a step-by-step format, and it takes about 5 weeks to get through. Each module is only about 20 to 30 minutes, but then there's homework in between. So it's a very actively engaged workshop. It's not just listening, but you're actually doing step by step, and the steps are in order for a reason. So
Wow.
you don't go out of order. If you start with module 6 and you're like, oh, that's a great idea, that's like that band-aid thing I talked about. It's
Right.
just going to put a band-aid on it. It's going to come right back. But if you start with module 1 and move your way up towards all 10 modules, the lawyers say you can't have guarantees and all this stuff, but like, I promise you that you are going to see a change,
I
even if
love it.
it's small. Oftentimes it's big, but you will see a change for the positive in your child, and you will feel more like successful as a parent. So you in turn will start to feel like, oh, okay, at least I know what to do,
Right.
versus so like helpless.
I love it. And again, you put them in order for a reason because you have to start with foundation. You have to start with the
Right.
base level. And I think for a lot of parents out there, it's can you recognize if you're on shaky ground? And if you are, and you're trying to wrestle a kid that's fighting you while you're on shaky ground, maybe we need to go back to the foundation and start,
Right.
at the beginning, which I think is very
Yeah.
helpful for a lot of parents. So we'll put a link to the webinar class in the show notes. So if people are interested, they can take a look at that. And I just want to thank you, Dr. Pam, for being with us today. It was really lovely to talk with you. And, having 30 years of experience working with these kids and being successful at it, you're doing something right. And we need more of that in the world. We need more people. And to my listeners out there, if this conversation brought up any questions or concerns or things you want to know more about, please go to hopelesslygifted.com and fill out the form there. And hopefully one of your questions can be answered on a future episode. Thanks so much again, Dr. Pam. It's good to see you.
I really appreciate you being here, and I think we share a similar passion to helping these children and families. And I'm glad to be part of your tribe here. Thank
Thanks
you.
so much. All right.
All
Take
right,
care.
take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye bye.